In the year 2093, the gleaming towers of New Dallas stood as monuments to human achievement, their solar-paneled surfaces capturing the morning light while quantum network transit pods hummed efficiently between them. Dr. Marcus Revan swiped his clearance badge at Biodefense Laboratory 7, nodding tersely at the retinal scanner as he had done countless mornings before. The security protocols at America's premier Level 5 biocontainment facility had long been considered impenetrable. His colleagues never suspected that behind Revan's unremarkable demeanor festered a pathological hatred of what he called the technocratic elite, those who controlled the resources of a world already straining under the weight of nearly 9 billion souls. In his climate-controlled office, he opened his personal terminal and checked the day's schedule, his expression betraying nothing of what he had already set in motion. Behind the reinforced polymer walls of the facility's most restricted section, a modified strain of lassa hemorrhagic fever waited in an inconspicuous canister within his backpack, the culmination of 15 years of classified weapons research now diverted to his personal apocalyptic vision. The hypersonic passenger shuttle to Singapore hummed with activity as Dr. Revan settled into his first-class pod, the stolen canister secure in his carry-on bag, which had passed unchallenged through security systems designed to detect conventional threats but blind to the biological nightmare he transported. Flight attendants in crisp blue uniforms moved efficiently through the cabin as nearly 200 passengers prepared for the 3-hour transoceanic journey. An elderly couple across the aisle smiled at him. A young woman 2 seats ahead worked frantically on a holographic presentation. Children laughed somewhere in the economy section. Revan waited until the shuttle reached cruising altitude at 70,000 feet, his heart rate steady as the precisely calculated moment approached. When the main cabin recycling system engaged with a barely perceptible shift in air pressure, he calmly retrieved the canister, unsealed its triple containment system with practice movements, and released its contents into the environmental system. A flight attendant passing by noticed his unusual behavior and the strange device in his hands. "Sir, is everything all right?" she asked with professional concern. Revan looked up, his face transformed by a rictus of ecstatic glee, laughter bubbling from his throat in unsettling waves. "I've just given everyone aboard a wonderful present," he replied, his voice pitched unnaturally high. "The gift of meaningful extinction." 3 days later, the first cases appeared in Singapore's Central Medical District, a handful of patients reporting mild flu-like symptoms that initially caused no alarm in a society accustomed to efficient management of routine illnesses. Hospital AI diagnostic systems categorized the presentations as typical seasonal respiratory infections, recommending standard antiviral protocols. Dr. Mei Zhang, senior virologist at the Pan-Asian Health Authority, might have overlooked the anomalous pattern in admission rates had her attention not been drawn to an unusual cluster of deteriorating patients who had all arrived on the same hypersonic shuttle from North America. By the time she established the connection, similar reports were emerging from New Dallas, where passengers from the return flight had dispersed throughout the megacity. Zhang's urgent communication to global health authorities contained words that would soon become seared into human consciousness: unknown pathogen with accelerated progression, initial mild presentation masking catastrophic physiological cascade, no response to broad-spectrum antivirals. Within 2 weeks, medical facilities across North America were overwhelmed as patients who had initially presented with what appeared to be common cold symptoms began experiencing catastrophic multi-system failures. Doctors watched in helpless horror as patients' temperatures soared beyond what human physiology should sustain, brain tissue deteriorating as core temperatures exceeded 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Military quarantine zones established around major population centers proved futile against a pathogen that spread through asymptomatic carriers for the critical first 48 hours. Emergency vaccine development initiatives mobilized unprecedented resources, but researchers found themselves facing a bioengineered virus specifically designed to circumvent all standard treatment approaches. The most sophisticated medical AI systems on the planet offered the same grim prognosis. The modified lassa strain incorporated advanced defense mechanisms that neutralized every antiviral compound in the global pharmacopoeia. Hospital hallways became charnel houses as patients experienced the final horrific stage of the disease, the liquefaction of internal organs and subsequent expulsion of bodily tissues through every available orifice, a process that medical professionals could neither prevent nor palliate. The Global Emergency Response Council convened in its underground Geneva facility as infection rates followed a ruthlessly exponential curve, spreading from initial outbreak sites along transportation networks that had once been the pride of 21st-century globalization. Council chairperson Dr. Eleanor Mbeki stared at projection models with increasingly grim resolution as attempts at containment failed in cascading sequence. "We are no longer discussing mitigation," she informed world leaders via secure quantum link. Current infection vectors indicate total planetary saturation within 45 days. The brutal efficiency of the engineered pathogen rendered obsolete every pandemic response protocol developed after the COVID-19 era. Mass cremation centers operated continuously as conventional burial methods became impossible to maintain. Urban centers descended into chaos as supply chains collapsed and the number of healthy individuals capable of maintaining critical infrastructure dwindled hourly. In Moscow, automated defense systems activated lethal protocols when security personnel succumbed at their posts. Across the megacities of East Asia, quantum-enabled surveillance networks broadcast footage of empty streets and abandoned vehicles to audiences that diminished with each passing day. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, that great insurance policy for humanity's agricultural future, stood silent and untended as its maintenance staff succumbed one by one to the relentless pathogen. Deep in the Amazon Preservation Zone, isolated indigenous communities that had maintained limited contact with the outside world watched the skies empty of the delivery drones that had become their link to global society. On Antarctic research stations, surviving scientists documented their own declining health in final transmissions that would never be received. The International Space Habitats, humanity's first permanent off-world colonies, implemented absolute quarantine protocols, their 1,000 residents becoming unwilling inheritors of humanity's accumulated knowledge as they watched Earth-based communication nodes go dark in succession. Aboard the Chinese-European lunar base, Commander Wei Chen ordered his team into the facility's medical stasis chambers, calculating that their limited life support resources might sustain them until Earth potentially recovered sufficiently to re-establish contact, a hope that grew fainter with each passing day. By the 100th day after what survivors would later call the Great Emptying, the global human population had crashed from 8 billion to scattered pockets of survivors numbering barely 3 million. These remnants existed not as communities but as traumatized fragments, each survivor carrying the psychological burden of having witnessed the agonizing deaths of everyone they had ever known or loved. The silence that descended upon the planet was broken only by the automated systems that continued their programmed functions, power plants cycling into emergency protocols before catastrophic failures, satellites continuing their silent orbits above a planet whose transmissions had largely ceased, medical nanobots still attempting to repair bodies long since cooled. In the ruins of major cities, the dead lay where they had fallen by the millions, their decomposition accelerated by the virus's final insult to human dignity, the complete destruction of cellular integrity that turned corpses into unrecognizable pools of putrescence that seeped into soil and water tables, creating secondary contamination zones that would remain dangerous for decades. The unburied dead became a monument to extinction more terrible than any deliberately constructed memorial could ever be. Those few who survived did so through accidents of geography, genetic anomalies, or desperate measures undertaken too late to save the broader population. A research team of 17 individuals in the Siberian Arctic, having detected the first alarming reports, severed all physical connections with the outside world and converted their geological research station into a makeshift quarantine facility. On remote Pacific islands, small populations who had implemented immediate and brutal isolation protocols found themselves the inheritors of a world they could barely comprehend. In the highlands of Ethiopia, a cluster of villages whose traditional suspicion of outsiders had previously been deemed problematic by globalization advocates discovered that their cultural insularity had become their salvation. These surviving pockets of humanity faced a reality more terrifying than the pandemic itself: the complete collapse of the technological infrastructure that had supported modern civilization. Medical supplies dwindled with no production facilities to replenish them. The knowledge required to maintain and repair advanced technology existed only in the minds of specialists who had largely perished. The electromagnetic pulse weapons deployed in the final desperate days by several military powers, attempting to halt human movement through the destruction of transportation systems, had rendered vast swaths of electronic equipment permanently inoperable. As years stretched into decades and decades into centuries, humanity's survivors descended into a new dark age more profound than any previous historical regression. Knowledge that had taken centuries to accumulate vanished as the few remaining individuals with specialized expertise died without transmitting their understanding to new generations. Children born into this post-collapse world grew up amid the decaying remnants of an incomprehensible civilization, taught to fear the crumbling urban centers as places of death and contamination. Written language itself became a rarity, preserved by isolated groups that maintained the tradition through religious-like devotion to salvaged texts. By the fifth generation after the collapse, most survivors had developed mythological explanations for the ruins that dotted the landscape, tales of gods who had punished humanity for its hubris, legends of ancient magic that had destroyed the world of plenty. The sophisticated medical understanding that might have prevented countless deaths from once treatable conditions devolved into folk remedies and superstition. What had once been the pinnacle of human achievement, space exploration, quantum computing, molecular engineering, became fantastical stories that elders told to wide-eyed children who could not conceive of such marvels. A night sky once dotted with thousands of visible satellites slowly cleared as the abandoned orbital infrastructure decayed and fell to Earth in fiery displays that reinforced apocalyptic mythologies developing among survivor groups. 800 years after Revan's act of catastrophic terrorism, the human population had painfully rebuilt to just over 50 million souls spread thinly across a planet still bearing the scars of civilization's fall. Archaeological expeditions from the emerging New Mediterranean Confederation, a loose alliance of city-states functioning at a technological level comparable to early 19th century Europe, uncovered data storage devices from the pre-collapse era. Unable to access their contents but recognizing their potential importance, they preserved these artifacts in temple-like repositories, waiting for the day when human knowledge might again reach the level required to unlock the wisdom and warnings of the ancestors. In what had once been the Oxford University complex, a small academy of scholars painstakingly reconstructed fragments of scientific understanding, working by candlelight to transcribe deteriorating pre-collapse texts before their knowledge was lost forever. The journey back to technological sophistication that had once seemed inevitable now stretched before humanity as a mountain path of almost inconceivable steepness, each step forward requiring the rediscovery of principles once taken for granted. And lurking in the collective memory of human society remained the terrible knowledge that progress itself carried within it the seeds of potential extinction, that the capacity to build also enabled the capacity to destroy on a scale that had nearly erased humanity from the earth. This fearful knowledge cast a shadow over every technological advance, a cultural trauma that would shape human development for millennia to come, long after the name of Marcus Revan had been forgotten and the details of his terrible gift to humanity had faded into legend.